Hey, so today we're going to talk about the Korg Prologue, and I'm going to give you my top sound design tips for working with it as an instrument. For those of you who don't already know me, I've made, I think, the most Prophet 6 tutorials, sound design tutorials on YouTube. And I love that instrument. It's fantastic, but it's somewhat similar to the Korg Prologue because it's also a focused instrument. You know, it's not like something where you can do absolutely anything that you possibly dream up. It's more of like you make a nice sound and you just let it sound good for what it is. You're not trying to over-program everything. You're not trying to just like sound design, make it so you hit one key and it just explodes into a million fractals of sound. This is sound design from the perspective of a player, someone who wants to have patches that are probably on the bread and butter side that just sound good for what they are. So that's what these tips are going to help you do. They're going to take your patches that may already sound pretty good and just bump them up to top tier. So let's get started. Okay, so let's start with an initialized patch here. I'll go into function, initialize, yes. There it is, our saw wave. Now, my first tip is just for this patch right here. This sounds fine. It sounds good, sure. It just doesn't sound as fat as it could sound. So if you're trying to play something with big, wide open chords like there's just a fatter sound. And all you have to do is just take the resonance and turn it up. That little high-end boost will give you a lot. There it is with the resonance. Here it is without it. Here it is with it. And without it. Pretty big difference, right? Tip number 2. So I'm just gonna, I'll leave that open for now. I'll leave that up because I'm gonna show you my next tip, which is for when you're bringing in VCO2. Now, generally, the reason that you're bringing in the second VCO is because you want something detuned. Maybe you want a different wave shape that you're going to use or a different octave, but I'm going to say that it's because we're trying to detune. We want that like detuned. We want a little more movement to our sound, you know. And bringing in your second oscillator is a great way of doing that because when you detune it, that beating that happens is different across the entire keyboard. So we have modulation that a change in the notes that is different. It's on a per note basis. And we're going to go over a lot of things like that today that are on a per note basis. So you can detune with this pitch knob. And that sounds good. But if instead you use this cross mod, I think it sounds a lot better. It just has more character to it, and it's very similar. The other advantage of using cross mod instead of pitch modulation is you have this whole, you get so much more knob range that you can use. The usable pitch range is like we're already gone at this point, and I've turned the knob just the tiniest little bit. On the cross mod, now I'm getting into unusable territory, but I'm like maybe a third of the way up on this knob, you know? That's a lot of room to play around with and fine tune. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is within our mod effects. Now, if you go into your mod effects and you find chorus, and then we go into program edit, hit this button on the right, and switch the chorus type over to vibrato. This is a very good thing to have because we only have one LFO. So we can get our vibrato from here without having to sacrifice our LFO. That's great. Even just a little bit of detuning, I think, goes a long way. But that's not really the tip. The tip here is to use your LFO in tandem with this vibrato. So I used to own a Juno 6 that I really loved, and it's just a great instrument. And one of the things that you do on the Juno is you have just a single LFO, but you have a few destinations that you can route it to at the same time. So I think that one of the most quintessential Juno sounds is to use your LFO for vibrato and to modulate pulse width, so of a square wave. So let's do that, because it sounds really good. And the only problem here is that these are at different rates, but you can just set them to be the same rate, and it sounds really good. We'll just go to a single oscillator. That sounds nice to me. So I'll set this vibrato to be the same speed. Do, 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 do. Sounds pretty close. That's a little faster. All right, I'm gonna give us a little bit of amp release here. Let's see how that sounds. Sounds pretty good. Speaking of the Juno series, tip number 4 is to use the custom effects and oscillators. They're on the internet, and I'll put a link to this one that I really like, and it's an emulation of the Juno chorus. So we'll go into the chorus, and we'll change the chorus type. Oh, it's in user. User type. All right, let's find it. Hera 2, that's it. So let's see. And we want that modulation speed to be about 15% and the depth at 50. That'll give us something pretty close to that Juno sound. Tip number 5, use your envelopes more. We have 8 different knobs here that are dedicated to our envelopes, and we got to use them. So that means no sustain at 100%. Okay, please, no sustain at 100%. Like, that's not the way to get a nice sounding patch out of this instrument. If anything, let's use a long decay. That's already so much nicer. If you must use sustain, then just use a little bit. But as soon as it hits that sustain level, that's when your sound is getting static. So that's when it's all of a sudden not so interesting to listen to. So we want to use the sustain. We want to use little touchy bits of attack. You can get that vintage response out of it by just adding a little bit of attack, especially to the filter envelope. So if we get just like... yeah, using especially if you're going to play some long chords, if you're using a sustain pedal or something. It doesn't need to be more modulated than that. Just having a nice amp envelope and a nice filter envelope really will go a long way. Maybe add in a little bit of reverb or some delay. For long things like that, delay is probably better. Tip number 6 is to use an expression pedal. Please use an expression pedal if you're playing a polysynth. It's so much better than using another LFO or something like that that's automated, because you have the human touch. You know, there's so many times that I've tried to use an LFO to automate something and it just kind of falls flat. Like I'll try to automate, I don't know what, anything. The cutoff of the filter, for example. I'll take the delay off. And like, this is a fine thing to do, but like, I don't know, it just doesn't do it for me. But if I'm gonna do something like that, then I really, like, I always find myself bumping the rate knob around and changing the rate, because I think that sounds a little bit better. I think what's so much better than using your LFO for that is to use the pedal. And I think that's, yeah, it's in modulation. No, it's not in modulation. There it is, under this pedal and wheel. So E pedal assign. Let's just assign it to the cutoff of the filter. And I've got my pedal here. Let's add a little bit of reverb. Just because using a pedal is also touchy. So, you know, like without reverb, just going up and down with it. It can be a little bit like steppy, like just because your foot isn't completely smooth. So it helps to smooth that out with some reverb or some delay. An expression pedal is also really great to use with an arpeggiator. So let's use our arpeggiator here. I'll put it to latch mode and set the range to 4. The final tip is to use velocity. Velocity is so important, and this is a velocity sensitive keyboard. That's something, velocity is something that the vintage instruments, well, some of the older vintage instruments don't have at all, like the Juno. No velocity sensitivity. This has velocity in it. And It's so important. We got envelope velocity for the filter envelope. Let's add, you don't have to add a ton of it, you know, like I didn't used to add velocity to much of my patches because I wasn't a confident enough keyboard player, and I was just like, I don't know, it's like I don't have the touch, you know. But you don't need to add a ton of velocity to it. You can just add a little bit, and it'll sound so much better. I mean, velocity is incredibly important. There's an entire instrument named after velocity, actually. It's the piano. The piano, short for forte piano, is loud and quiet, right? It's the whole instrument. It may be the most important instrument in humankind, the most important instrument in modern times for sure. Literally named after velocity sensitivity. It's just a velocity sensitive harpsichord. So let's just go ahead and use that because it sounds so much better when it just has that human touch. Again, it's that per note modulation, you know? You get, oh, my arpeggiator's still on. You get a softer touch here and a heavier touch here. So you just have two different timbres. Or maybe you go the other way. And you just get two different sounds every time you play the note. It sounds different. I mean, that is really, really important. This has it. You gotta use it though. It makes such a huge difference to actually use that. Okay, so that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video and you want more like it, then don't forget to like the video on YouTube and subscribe to my channel. Thanks.